Hi, I'm Eric Lubau, and welcome to Beyond the Belt. This is a conversation with Will Stone, a black belt out of Swindon, UK. Will is a member of the UK Parliament representing Swindon North, an Army veteran, a former bouncer, as well as the owner of 10th Planet Swindon. He also enjoys tabletop games like Dungeons & Dragons and Warhammer. I hope you enjoy our chat. Hey, Will, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me, what was it like for you to get your black?
It's a surreal thing, to be honest with you. It's something you kind of aspire to have when you're starting the journey. So when you're a white belt, everybody wants to be a black belt eventually. And then so I trained probably 16 years before I got my black belt. So I've been training a long time. I was a purple belt for 7 years. I was a brown belt for 4. Like I kind of I got to a point where I wasn't really that bothered about it. Well, I thought I wasn't that bothered about it. And then when I got it did kind of mean the world, you know. But I didn't really think about it too much. And then it happened, and you kind of realize that although it's, as everyone says, it's kind of like it's not the end of your journey. You've kind of got to that notch, and like there's a massive difference between saying you're a black belt and a brown belt. Despite the skill level was pretty much the same, it meant a huge deal, yeah.
What changed for you? Or actually, let me change say that differently. What was different for you when you got that? Did you feel like you just had a target on your back? Did you feel like, oh, now I can relax? Like what was different?
Yeah, so I relaxed quite a bit actually, and yeah, again, this is a really weird thing because I was running my own gym, so it wasn't like I was being monitored, but I feel my jujitsu got significantly more playful when I got my black belt. Like when I was a brown belt, I was focusing a lot more on competition and building the school and doing things in a certain way. Since I've got my black belt, I'm a lot more fun. Like not always, because me trying new things and experimenting could be pressure passing with my students being a little bit mean. But like my jujitsu game has evolved because I'm trying a lot more new stuff, and I think I've killed the ego a lot more since getting the black belt. That's kind of how I feel.
Do you feel like that's a common thing that happens to people at black belt? Or like, does the ego change, or does the ego kind of be like, oh, I'm a black belt, I have to defend it? Or is that kind of person dependent?
I think it's person dependent. I've seen both sides. I've seen people that relax. I've seen people that are like, well, no, I'm a black belt. I can never get tapped, which is a really stupid thing. Like
Yeah.
I got tapped so much more since being a black belt because I put myself in vulnerable positions. You know, and obviously I'm not training as much anymore. But like it is a mixture. But certain people take it super seriously, which I think is harmful for their jujitsu. But for me, it has become more playful.
Do you feel like your journey through your 10th planet, and I know 10th planet is generally, no gi only. Do you feel like your jujitsu was impacted by not training in a gi? That's always something I like to get people's opinions on.
So I train in the gi up to brown belt.
Okay.
So I was in the gi up to brown belt. I think doing both is good. I've got students that don't, but don't train in the gi at all, and I've got them to put the gi on, and we've tried it sometimes. Like for me, the reason I switched over to 10th Planet, going slightly deviating from your question, but to
Yeah.
explain, it's like I switched over to 10th Planet because I felt that the clubs where I was training and the availability of jiu-jitsu was somewhat limited in the sense that they weren't practicing the full art, in my opinion, whereas Eddie has been pioneering what I view as complete jiu-jitsu for a while. So I think it's all dependent on what club you can go to, but I prefer an open jiu-jitsu, and that's why I kind of preferred the no gi because it was you could do footlocks, you could do reaping. I'd never learned rubber guarded, like not properly until I trained at Tempan. I didn't understand the lockdown system, so I felt like it was a more complete system. That being said, I attribute having a good guard to many years of spider guard. It's it is a balance. Like my flexibility, my dexterity with my legs probably does come down to many years in the gi. So I think both are helpful, but I just prefer grappling no gi to be honest with you. And I found it's a lot more fun. My hands don't consistently ache
Yeah.
anymore. You know, like it's faster, it's more flowy. But yeah, each to their own. But I know people that have never trained in the gi, and I know people that have never done no gi. It's kind of up to a personal thing, really. But I would say try both.
How do you define like a complete game? Like I know you just said leg locks and whatever, but is there like when I think about what Eddie Bravo did for jiu-jitsu, I think about like a lot of different variations of control. Like I think mission control, I think about his all the stuff he did for MMA as like a control position, a suite of control positions. But like how do you think about that?
So I agree with what you said, and I think that's the kind of foundation of 10th Planet if we're going back like 15 years ago when you look at Eddie's books and what he was talking about. But I think it's evolved more into the sport focus now, the 10th Planet MMA focus, at least at my gym and the people I talk to. Obviously, there are still people that do it, but MMA's changed. Now, you can't get away with just being a grappler, so having a good rubber guard isn't going to save you against a solid wrestler who's also grappling. I think we've evolved more to the sports, and I don't really even think it's jiu-jitsu anymore. I think it's grappling, and that's like we do wrestling, we copy Danaher for the footlocks. We look at what's going on with the pressure passing from the Atos guys and stuff like that. So it's like it's taking in the good bits of all of the grappling arts and kind of putting it together. And one of the things that I found really attractive about the 10th Planet system is so we do a thing called the warm-ups, and that's kind of like it's a bunch of moves all linked together, and it's got like kind of an end goal to it. So it's like a sequence. It's kind of like synchronized dancing. Everybody knocks up a martial arts for doing kata. It's kind of like kata with grappling. And for my brain, I really gelled with that because Eddie's overall focus is that whatever position you're in, you can get to a submission, you can finish. Whereas other clubs, not knocking them because they've produced champions and they've done fantastic stuff, but other clubs I trained at, it would be you do an armbar, you do a scissor sweep, and then you do a triangle, but there was no tangible link together. So for my learning style, I struggled with that. Whereas if there's a sequence of, well, you start with passing the guard, you get to side control, then you go for an armbar, it's all linked in together. That worked really well for me, and I think that's what I mean by complete jiu-jitsu. Like ours is a system where it's kind of like a spider diagram. Wherever you get to, there is something for you. Like even if I'm in mount, I can footlock you. Well, assuming I can get to I can try and footlock you. You know, if I'm in closed guard, I'm going to be able to go to rubber guard. I'm going to be able to get to mission control. I can do things. There's always an attack off it, and that's what I kind of mean by complete, I guess.
I actually really like that definition. The other thing that I think that 10th Planet did that's really like simultaneously funny and beautiful is that 10th Planet assigned names to everything in a way that even though some of those names are kind of ridiculous, which I think is characteristic of Eddie himself, it allows you to talk about things in very specific ways and say, oh, you're here and it's actually this, and now you can go to that. And generalized, I don't think I saw that. So I think complete system makes sense.
Yeah, and like it makes it so much easier to coach. Like it really does. And like I say, I know Eddie is controversial and he has some funny views, but his jiu-jitsu, I think, in my opinion, is flawless. Like when he says mastering the system, it is a complete system. Like we've seen it since like all of the other gyms are doing it now. Like when we look at like Danaher and those guys, like they deliberately talk in different languages so they can brand stuff. Like I remember I was trying to coach one of my. So there was a group of us when we were purple belts, right? And we were kind of like always competing against each other. There was like 3-4 guys, but we were buddies. But the spectrum back then for purple belts was so small you would bump into the same people all the time. And I was trying to coach a guy called Luke, who now runs Roger Gracie Bristol. He's got some phenomenal athletes out there, Luke Chamberlain. And I was like, go for a ham sandwich, go for a ham sandwich. And he was kind of like, what? After he's like, what are you talking about? And then it dawned on me, it's like, well, not everybody learns that sort of stuff. So it's useful, but it's also secret.
Do you find as a coach that the breadth of things that you have to try to get people to learn, like the nomenclature, is a problem for people who don't maybe learn in all the standard ways? Or is it just like an additional tool in the teaching toolkit?
I don't really know. I haven't really thought about that, to be honest. I think for people that have come across from different gyms, it could potentially be a struggle because they're used to learning in a certain way and they have to absorb different information. But for people I've had from day one, it's kind of just the culture. So it's just what they're used to. So I don't think it's too much of a problem. But it can be overwhelming for people at the start. But you soon get used to it. It's just,
well, you came from a different culture, right? Like, how was that for you to learn all those names and tactics?
Massive. So and it was a real big ego check. And I'll talk about two separate things because there was two massive ego checks for me. So, like I said, I started at Roger Gracie Oxford because that was the closest gym to me in Swindon, and I trained under a guy called Andre Gomez, who was a brown belt. Phenomenal. Like, there weren't a lot of brown belts around back then. I'm really privileged to train with those guys. He ended up leaving, and then Max Campos took over, so I kind of went with the Oxford Shoot Fires. Yeah, again, Max is a fantastic competition guy. So I've got so many really good mentors, and I don't knock the gi. But when I joined the army, I ended up moving away from Swindon, and training wasn't as great as it could be. But there were a couple of guys in the army that did train, and one of them was a guy called Alex, and he trained under Mick Brosser, like the OG of 10th Planet in the UK. Like, I love Mick. He's the one who gave me my black belt. He's been flying the flag when 10th Planet wasn't reputable. There was a time where people used to really smack talk us, and Mick, great grappler. So I went down there. I was purple belt at the time, and I just got demolished by Mick, and I didn't really understand why. Like, I couldn't work it out. So that made me want to train more, and that led me to going out to San Francisco. And the reason I went out is because obviously Denny is a badass. Like, he was EBI 1 champion. Like, he was the first ever black belt. His grappling is unreal, and the guys he's got there, like, you know, Adam Sacknoff, Michael Hillerbrand, like, so many good guys. Like, when I was out there, Alan Sanchez was a purple belt. Now that guy is absolutely crushing it.
I met Adam when he was a blue belt and Denny was a black belt. So that tells you how long ago I trained with Adam and Denny.
Yeah.
Like, it was a while.
Yeah, sweet. Like, that is a while. But yeah, man. But yeah, Adam is phenomenal grappler. Like, so really high grappling IQ. Like, and a nice guy as well. Like, so good. Like, yeah, like. But go back to, so I went out to San Francisco. I got my brown belt just before going out, right? And I went in there and I was like, my aim was to learn more of the leg lock game and immerse myself in 10th Planet. Because I was like, I want to get better. So I did 7 weeks out there. The first day you go into the gym, I got absolutely beat up by all of the blue belts. Like, I just got absolutely owned, right? And I went back to my hostel and I had my gi there, and I wasn't in tears, but I was really emotional about it. And I'm like, do I just email Ralph Gracie and be like, go and train there in the gi? Like, I know I'm good in the gi. Like, I've done quite well in the gi. Like, I've medaled at British National as Army champion. Like, I've done like a lot in the gi. So I was kind of like, do I just stop? Do I just pretend this never happened? And like, but that kind of made me go, do you know what? No. So I went back. I trained every single day, 3 times a day, just embraced the beat down for a couple of weeks. And then it started to click, and I started being able to just be where my level was at. But it just took a lot of time to transition over. So it was really hard to absorb it and learn the techniques and the movements, because being a gi guy who name sort of thing was like spider guard, you're exposing your feet a lot of the time. You know, like trying to do De La Hiva and not worrying about toe holds. And this is another thing. If I briefly go back, sorry, I'm rambling.
No, go ahead.
If I go back to like when I talk about complete jiu-jitsu, and I think a lot of the gyms have got better now, but at the time you didn't touch footlocks properly until you're a brown belt. So like my whole game was flawed. It was completely flawed because I didn't worry about it. Like I could get into 50-50 guard, I could sweep you over, I could come up, I could pass, but I wasn't contemplating, well, he's going to toe hold me, he's going to heel hook me. And that was a real eye-opener for me. So yeah, those sort of ego checks were really hard, and embracing the system, it's similar to when you start jiu-jitsu and you go in there and you get beat up and you want to either run away or embrace it. Like, it was another like 2-stage embracing where a big part of me wanted to just go back to the gi. But I'm so glad I didn't. But it was a weird one.
So you don't train in the gi that much nowadays?
Not at all. I had a flair when I was in the army of doing a lot of judo because I love judo. I did judo as a kid and kind of dropped it in my teens because, you know, girls and alcohol kind of happened. But
they can be distractors.
Yeah, it's not good for grappling. You know, you've got to stay away from that. But yeah, I don't really put the gi on that much anymore. I did a competition at brown belt, and I will do one at black belt at some point, just because I want to medal at every single bout. Like that's quite an achievement, and I managed to win 2 fights and lose 1. I managed to footlock 2 guys, and then I got beat up by a guy called Lobo, who was really, really good grappler. He got bronze in the Worlds. I think he beat me like 10 points to 0. But yeah, it was a cool experience. I think I would like to medal at black belt just so I've done it in the gi.
I think it's healthy to have goals. That feels like a pretty good goal to have. And that's like a pretty good achievement. As somebody who's never competed and will never compete in jujitsu, I think that's a good outlook to have.
Is there a reason why you don't like to compete, or is it just?
I competed as a wrestler. I was an All-American wrestler, and in college, and I know what it's like to compete, and I know what it feels like to push myself and cut weight, and I've done that. And I love grappling, but I like teaching people more. And I feel like in my 40s at this point, I can compete, but it just doesn't interest me. I'd rather help other people be successful because I find on average, a better coach than I am grappler. So that's my main
Yeah,
thing.
and like that's just cool as well. I think it's there's a lot of pressure on people to compete, but I think it's finding what is enjoyable for you and what is going to make you want to stay in the sport.
Yeah.
And I say that to my guys as well, because I'm like, oh, should I compete? Should I compete? I was like, well, do you want to? Like, I'm not at the point with my technical skill where I'm going to produce a world champion. Just being realistic, you know, I'm not going to produce people that can be ADCC champions. I've got a British champion underneath me, stuff of that nature. But like, for me, it's about having fun, and don't add extra baggage onto something if you don't need to do that. You know, because like I don't get it more. Like I did Polaris, and because I've been so busy with my real job, I had no stress. But ordinarily competing, I get horrible knots in my back. My stress levels build up. I don't sleep properly. I'm not the nicest person to be around. And like, if you're not trying to be a pro and you're not trying to compete on that high level, or you're at least realistic about that, what's the point? Like, if you love it, and I know some people that really embrace it and they love competing. Like they love it. It's fun. Like some of my guys like to go down as a team and they love to compete, and it's awesome, and I think that's great. But like, I wouldn't push students to compete if they didn't want to compete. Like if someone says to me, how do I get better faster? I'd probably say, yeah, you need to compete, because that's helpful to you, so you can at least feel out the honest holes in your game. Because I think that's a massive one sometimes. Like you kind of get exposed, and I've been really lucky through getting exposed in competition, which has made me come back and reevaluate where I'm at as well. So I think there are perks to it, but no, I totally get that.
What got you into teaching?
What got me into teaching? So this is going to sound really arrogant, and it sounds really bad when I say it out loud. But like, when I was a white belt, there wasn't a lot going on, right? And I started training. This is probably after about 8 months to a year of training. And like I said to my coach, I was like, one day I'm going to be a black belt and I'm going to run my own gym. Like, I just felt like it was something I really wanted to do. And he was like, you're an idiot. Like, you're a white belt. Like, you're not even a blue belt. You're not, like, he didn't call me an idiot, but he kind of like laughed it off. It's like Brazilian sort of humor of like, get your blue belt first and go from there. But I felt like it was something I really wanted to do. And I was so passionate about jiu-jitsu that I didn't see a way that I wouldn't be able to do it. So it's almost like white belt arrogance, but I did do it. So,
But I don't understand why that's arrogant though. If you were like, I want to do this and this feels like something I can do, I feel like it falls into the category like nobody that I believed, nobody that I trusted told me I couldn't, so I did.
yeah, no, that is accurate, but it is a bit bizarre as a white belt not even doing much, thinking you can do something. But yeah, I think jiu-jitsu is magical. I just, it's something that I'm going to do for the rest of my life, and I'm really privileged to have ran a gym, you know, and like it is a great thing, and I would encourage anybody in it. Like for me, like teaching was way more fun than competing, you know, way more fun. I think watching people who come into your gym that can't even do a roly poly, like 4 or 5 years down the line, like just absolutely crushing it and doing moves that I don't even understand sometimes is so good. And like seeing people's confidence build is huge, man. Like it is such a gift. Like I love teaching. It's great.
I feel the exact same way. I love watching people learn. I think for me, one of the most beautiful things about teaching is when you see these people who they come in, this is the hour and a half in their day that they have for themselves. There's no kids, there's no work, there's no partner, whatever it is, like saying, I need you. It's like, this is the time they can focus on themselves. They do focus on themselves, and then they get something like maybe it's a triangle, something somewhat simple. And they're like, I did it. I did it. I did the thing that you showed me how to do today or last week or the week before. And like that moment of like beautiful hope, like genuine happiness and joy. Like I love teaching for seeing that in
Yeah.
people just whenever I can get that to happen.
It's magical, and like there's so many layers to it as well, because like you say, this is a point where people are coming in and they are looking after themselves. It's their downtime. They're choosing to spend their downtime. When you've got people with families, busy life, they're choosing to spend it with you and at your gym. And like I've had students kind of say like, well, if this didn't exist, I don't know what I would do with myself. And like I know that's a negative, but the positive from it is because you've created a community where people are there. It's fantastic, and like yeah, it is a great thing. And that's why like sometimes I get annoyed with other coaches where they focus too much on the monetary side of it and just people in versus people out, and it's a business. And don't get me wrong, it's a business. You got to make money, but I love the culture. Like I genuinely like all the people at my gym. I'm friends with. Like I really am. Like we like this is something I took from America culture, and it's a really bizarre one. So I have a lot of discussions about, because people always talk, especially in political terms, well, what is British culture? What is this? What is that? It's like there's good elements of all culture, but like something I loved about my time in America, because I've been out a few times training jiu-jitsu, because it's the mecca of jiu-jitsu, because well, arguably, obviously that or Brazil, but America for me was a lot safer, and I speak the language, so it makes life a lot easier. But like how the people in America, and I don't know if it's just because I've been to the sunny spots, but how they treat you is so much. I didn't get that in the UK in the gyms, and that's what I wanted to bring back from my gym, was that sort of culture. And I love that sort of. Some people say it's like the kind of cheesy CrossFit vibes, but I think it works, like, and my students kind of mock me now because like I don't teach full time there anymore. I go in and I train like a normal person. My guy James is running the gym, but like whenever anyone's leaving, I'm always like, when you're back next. Like I'm always like trying to solidify that, when are they coming back, build it up. And that's something I learned in America. It's like if you actually show some interest in your students and you actually build a community, people are going to want to be there. Even if you're having a down day and you feel like not training, but actually if I go there, it's going to be fun and people actually give a shit about me. That's a positive.
I don't know that I experienced a lot of that in America at my home gyms because they were in New York, and like New York City has a little bit of that, but its city culture is a little bit different. But I drove around the US for 6 months with my dog and lived out of my car and went to probably 70, 80 different jujitsu schools, and I felt that kind of thing. They were like, "Oh, it's so cool to see you. It's so nice of you to drop in." Like that. I felt that, and I feel like that is missing a little bit in the average city gym, but I don't know if that's the case in the UK.
Yeah, I would say so. And again, I think it probably it kind of sounds geographically as well. So I've never trained in New York, so I can't comment. But I would imagine New York would be pretty similar vibe to London on that sort of level. But like
It is a
if
little
you
bit.
go up if you go up north, people are a lot more homely. There's different sort of areas. In America, I've only trained in LA, San Francisco, and Florida, Orlando. So they are sunny spots, but I felt all those gyms have been so welcoming. Like when I went out, so I absolutely love Universal Studios. It's my favorite place in the world. So when I went out there, I was like, oh, I really want to train, and there was like a Gracie Barra close to it, and like obviously Gracie Barra's got its own reputation. I'm like, I don't really want to go, but I want to train. And I went there, and it was lovely. Like they were so welcoming, and like the roles were fantastic, and the people were great. And like one of the people was I was going to call an Uber, and they're like, we'll give you a lift back to your hotel. Like it was just an amazing, lovely, fantastic gym. And like I can't speak highly enough of it. So that was my own prejudices, which were completely flawed on that side. But yeah, I've just like I say, in the places I've been, I can only speak for. I've trained quite a lot of gyms, but I can only speak for those locations. It's been great. Like the people have been so nice, and there's a real culture around it. Like I've gone out there not knowing anybody. Like in 2011, I went out to Santa Monica and I just trained for 3 months. And like I went out there, I had my hostel at the start. I ended up training at this gym called Street Sports, which is a really random gym. Um, it was bizarre how I went out there. It's because I kind of fell out with someone and I ended up not being able to train at their gym. It was an odd story, but I was walking back from my hostel, and I wanted to go to 7-Eleven to get some Coca-Cola to make myself feel better. And I passed Street Sports. It was this really like dingy gym which looked terrible. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna check it out tomorrow. So I went in there. Like there were 7 black belts on the mat, something I'd never experienced before because I didn't train with brown belts before. They invited me to a beach party on Friday. I ended up sleeping on the couch of one of the guys who I'm still friends with now for it was just such a cool and welcoming place. Yeah, big shout out to Street Sports.
I'll include I'll get a link from you or something, include their link in the show notes. I feel like that's one of the most beautiful things about jujitsu and why I love it so much is that sense of community. I found my sense of community with the Globetrotters, BJJ Globetrotters. And I met my wife through that on the mats.
Amazing.
I have friends all over the world as a result of it. And so for me, that sense of community has been the thing that made jujitsu partially a home for me and why I feel like I'm lucky to do this to give back a little.
Yeah, definitely. Like it is such a great thing. I don't know very many other sports or hobbies where you can go most places in the world and you can go to a gym and you can have some sort of connection.
Yeah.
You know, and it's magical. And like I think the best people train jiu-jitsu.
I agree. If that's the case, then what made you shift over to politics? Like that, you had a gym, you have a community. Why get into politics?
It kind of happened by accident. So, and this like my political journey isn't typical. And I know every politician tries to come across human. They're like, oh, I'm not really a politician, but I wasn't. Like I left school with 1 GCSE, which is very, very low standard. Right? I joined the army later on, and my options were like to join the rifles, the artillery, the RRC, because I was that low qualified with my education.
Okay.
So I joined the army. I redid my education in the army because they forced me onto it. I fell in love with learning. Fast forward of that. So I set up a gym, and my gym is not in the nicest part of Swindon. If we're putting it politely, it's not in the best place, but it's affordable, and I love that. So, and it's got character, right? But there was lots of fly tipping and antisocial behaviour and stuff like that around the area. I was getting in touch with the council quite regularly, which was run by the Conservatives, which were the party we were just kicked out of national government. No biggie. But yeah, so like
Little
I was
show
getting
their
in touch
brush
with,
there.
yeah, just did it. But I was getting in touch with them, and nothing was happening. So I started up a community litter pick group, which sounds really dorky, but I was like, I'm going to clean up the area I love. Because I've been in the army. I love service. I love that side of things. Like that's what jiu-jitsu is as well, in my opinion. You're doing a community good. So I started up a litter pick group. Then councillors started coming to it who were Labour councillors, and I kind of got talking to them, and I realized that we had more in common, and I was like, well, do you know what? Like, I wasn't getting anywhere with the council. I was like, well, I'm going to become a councillor so I can change things from within. So then I became a parish councillor first, which is like the lowest tier. And I managed to do some real fantastic stuff. Like I set up a cost of living shop selling food for trade prices. I got some disabled play park equipment, which was really like minor things, but the max I could do at that level. And it just inspired me to get more involved. Like I was like, I want to do more. And like, then I got elected as a borough councillor, which was great, but you still can't do as much as you would like. Like, so the natural step was to go into becoming an MP, and I had to have a really tough talk with my partner Alona. She trains jiu-jitsu as well, but we had to have a discussion of one, can our relationship survive it because it's intense, and two, is it worth the jiu-jitsu loss? Politics, like I work 60 hours a week now, whereas when I was doing jiu-jitsu, I was doing maybe 4 or 5 hours a day. Like my life was, I used to get up at 5 and go do the 6 a.m. class, and I used to do all that stuff. But it was completely different. Like the tone of life was different. But we had these conversations, and I'm like, I want to change the world. I genuinely want to make the world a better place. So I kind of have to do it. There wasn't an option. The more involved you get with politics, the more injustice you kind of see. My eyes got opened to some of the most deprived areas of my community, and like the UK is like the 7th richest country in the world, right? It's not a poor country, but we've got people that are genuinely starving. We've got people that are living in fear. So like when you open that sort of box, it's really hard just to sleep at night and ignore that these things are happening. Jiu-jitsu's on the back burner. I still train once a week, maybe twice if I'm lucky, but yeah, I kind of, in a not too altruistic noble sense, I changed career because I felt like I was good at it. I felt like I could be good at it, and I want to change the world. I really do. And
That's really beautiful. That's like that's kind of the most, I feel like the most kind of wholesome, authentic, genuine sense of purpose that people can have about a job. And I think it's really beautiful that you found something like that for yourself.
I want everyone to have this. It it is the best job in the world. And I would have said that when I was in the army. Then I would have said that when I was teaching jiu-jitsu. But like I get to work in Westminster, which was amazing. Like since I've been elected in the 6 months, like me and my team, because I have a team behind me. It's not just me by myself. We've done like over 3,000 pieces of casework. That ranges from people becoming homeless, people being
Sorry,
ripped off by
I want to
water
just
companies.
like for people who are not from the UK and don't have any idea kind of what you're saying.
Sorry.
I think I don't want to totally interrupt you. I do want to come back to this, but like, what does an MP do? Uh, and like, what is casework? I just want to add some context because I looked this up and I think it's super interesting, and I want everyone to know what you're saying. So as you say it, they can understand the impact you're having.
Yeah. So for the listeners in America, probably like the equivalent to a congressman. So I represent the borough of Swindon North, which is where I've been born, raised. Like, it's my place. On a day-to-day basis, it varies. MPs, your time split between voting on laws which are being introduced by the government. So also you have to read up on the legislation which is coming forward, make sure you're knowledgeable, talking in the chamber, having these sort of discussions about why we should do things, why we shouldn't do things. Then you're aiming to like, ultimately, for me anyway, I can't talk for MPs, but my aim is to improve Swindon. So I meet with businesses, charities, schools, people like that. And I get their feedback, and then I try and put forward policy on their behalf. So it's kind of like I'm at the bottom of the chain as an MP. I'm a backbencher. My counterpart in South Swindon, Heidi Alexander, is now the Secretary of State for Transport. She's a big fish, right? So, I feed stuff up to ministers and Secretary of State. We try and make policy off the back of it. But there's also like, sorry, I will deviate slightly, and then I'll go back to the casework. So throughout meetings and your known experience, you can make changes happen. Like you're kind of like an influential person. So I'm going to introduce Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu into the police, right? It's not as simple as that. So I started. I was like, I want to do this. I know it's good. You start talking to people. You have to prove it with data, and you have to go through so much red tape because of systems. So I wrote a document. I spoke to the superintendent who is in charge of Wiltshire. He's like the head police officer. He loves it, but he's like, we can't cut the red tape that easily. So then you have to go back to the drum and think, well, how can you get it in so people of power are going to sign it off? So I'm like, well, let's look at police officers who have been assaulted. So we got all the data up about the amount of police officers that have been assaulted, the amount of times tasers have been deployed, the amount of times people feel they've been wrongly restrained or detained in an incorrect way. Police officers getting assaulted, tasers are going up, baton use is going up. It's a trend. So then I was like, well, to get everyone to sign off on it, let's look at what's happening to the police officers that are being assaulted. Because we can't change the current system because we don't have enough data. So we have to do something different. So we've deviated slightly and we've gone, police officers being assaulted, we're going to do this as a confidence building. So then I reached out to the jiu-jitsu community and I got Dan Strauss, the Raspberry Ape, a fantastic grappler to head the program up. We're going to do a 12-month program with Wiltshire Police where 20 officers who have been assaulted are going to get a seminar from Dan or a high-level black belt once a month doing this program. We're going to collect the data beforehand, collect the data at the end. Then we're going to invite other police forces to take part in this, build up as much data as possible. In 5 years' time, I'm going to go, this clearly works. Jiu-jitsu is the answer. Let's change it so it's implemented fully for all officers. But that's just an example of my learned experience as a jiu-jitsu athlete being implemented to politics for a good. There's other things like I am trying to change the law on road safety. So there was a incident which is absolutely horrific. It happened 2 years ago in my community of Swindon where Harry Parker got ran over and died. He's a child. The woman who ran him over didn't have a driver's license. She didn't have insurance. She didn't stop at the scene. But there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute her. and that doesn't sit right with me. Like
Yeah,
I
it's
speak to the
tough.
family a lot. It's insane. Like from like my perspective, the first thing I did, I met with the CPS, which is a Crown Prosecution Service, who are the ones that do the prosecution, so I could understand why she hasn't been prosecuted. They haven't done anything wrong. They've just followed the letter of the law. So then I'm like, well, we need to change that. That's something that can't sit, and we can't allow a flawed part of the law to remain like that. As a backbencher, like I say, you don't have as much input as I would like sometimes, but you can do a thing called a 10-minute rule bill. So you decide, you write a law of what you want to change. You get legal people and like lawyers and stuff like that. You draft it together. You take it to the minister, and then you put it forward to the House. So hopefully, at some point this year, I'll be putting forward the Harry Parker law, where we're trying to change it. So if you are driving without a license and you cause an accident which results in death, the default is careless. So I'm trying to close that loophole. You do it to the House, you speak, it gets voted on, then it goes back for scrutiny, then it gets voted on again, then it goes to the Lords, then it becomes a law. So that's like a range of things. So meeting loads of people, trying to change the law, learning the law which is coming out, sitting on committees is big. And then the casework side of things. So the people I represent in Swindon North, if they have a problem that is above local council level, like they get in touch with me. So that could be a problem with the police, that could be a problem with water companies, building companies, that could be the council aren't doing their job properly. It could be they're facing homelessness, immigration status. There is so much which I wouldn't have even thought of before becoming an MP, because you get contacted for absolutely everything. So ordinarily, casework comes through emails and it goes onto a system, and my team go on and we sort it out. So we'd contact the Secretary of State or the minister responsible or the leader of the council, and we try and get a resolution that way. But once a week, I have surgeries where people come in, because some people, despite being realistic, when it's casework referred, you're probably better talking to one of my caseworkers, because I'm kind of like a surface level expert on most things, but I'm not an expert 100% like housing. Whereas I've got a member of my team, Eve. She is fantastic when it comes to housing issues. You got an issue of housing, Eve will sort it out so much better than me. But people want to talk to the MP, so they come in and we have a chat and we go through what we're going to do and actions on afterwards. So like since being elected, my team have done over 3,000 pieces of casework, and that's like we saved this one gentleman £11,000 on water bills because the water company messed it up. And this guy was this is where the system's broken. It's like this guy was a smart guy. He was the CEO of a company, and he was just being ignored by Thames Water. I ended up contacting them. I got them to go out and reevaluate the case, and like, actually, no, we owe him money. So it's things like that. Like we've got people emergency housing where they were going to be homeless. We've helped with domestic violence cases. I'm trying to reform the police. I'm looking at apprenticeships for the armed forces. It is a very crazy job because you can kind of form your work how you want to do it. You know, like there's certain members of parliament that want to go up the ladder and they want to be ministers, they want to do that. There's certain members that love speaking in the chamber. There's certain members that like me that like constituency work. You don't have really anyone telling you what to do as long as you turn up to the votes. You know, as long as you turn up to the votes and don't say anything stupid, you're probably going to be all right. But it's such a gift, like it really is. And I think for me, I have such an opportunity to sculpt the future of my town, and yeah, it's great.
That's awesome. Like hearing you talk about this with such passion is something I wish more public servants did. I feel like my experience of many public servants is once you get to a certain level, that passion sort of leaves and they get a little jaded. But people who get to work with people, like it sounds like you're doing on a regular basis, that passion kind of remains.
Yeah, there are a lot of good people in politics as well, right? And I think
For
it
sure.
it is a tricky one because, like you say, the longer you're in it, like I'm still fresh. I've been here 5 years. You know, like the longer you're in it, it probably does wear on you a little bit. But I think political systems in different countries make it more challenging. Like especially when we're talking about America, like the funding model for politicians in America make it very challenging for people to get elected. Like the UK, it's tough, but it's nowhere near the same level. Like I spent a lot of money being. As you can see, I got Bernie on the wall
Yeah.
there as well. I
Gives
spent
a
a
little
fair
insight
amount.
into your political views.
Yeah, just a little. But like I didn't spend a crazy amount to become an MP. It was probably around £8,000, £9,000 in total of like lost earnings and paying for stuff. Which, if you think about it,
That is like
in comparison
relatively
to America,
nothing compared to
it's
America.
peanuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely peanuts, you know, and that makes it a little bit more honest because we do have caps on what you can spend, and it is election free members. So to become an MP, I can't talk about the other parties, but every constituency has in our area, we have a CLP, which is a local body of members to the Labour Party. It's kind of like a group. They elect who they want to be their candidate. So for me, like you have to go through a selection process, but it was somewhat easier for me because I'd been a councillor. They all knew me. I already built my campaign up because I'll go around knocking on their doors, talking to them like, "Will you come and vote for me?" Like you see me around. Like I picked a lot of litter up. I'm a good guy, and that pushed me forward. I think the UK, especially the Labour Party system of selecting candidates, is pretty good, and that's why you've got one of the most diverse groups of candidates. You know, like you've got people like me in Parliament now who come from a single parent background who didn't do great at school. You know, we've got the most women and ethnically diverse of a Parliament ever because people have managed to get up through that sort of grassroots initiative, and I really like.
Do you feel like some of the things that you've done and some of the influences you've had in your life has made you that kind of person? Like I read that you did factory work and were in a call center, which are ostensibly like thankless kind of jobs. Do you feel like that's given you a different way of thinking and a different way of operating as a result of that?
Yes and no. Like, I think jiu-jitsu in the army has been my biggest influences, and my dad, to be honest. Working in those jobs, I didn't love it. I'm not going to lie to you, I didn't love it. But that spurred me on to do more. You know, like if I was if I didn't have that experience of hating working in a factory, I wouldn't have been pushed into join the army because weirdly enough, so when I joined the army, it wasn't my first choice. So my dad was in the army. I didn't think I would join the army, but I kind of noticed all my friends were progressing in life because they'd put a bit more effort into school. You know, they had done the right things, or they were like getting trades and stuff like that. And I didn't feel like I was going anywhere, and that kind of pushed me to join the army because I wanted a sense of purpose. So it was quite lucky in a sense how things panned out, but they drove me to do more because I didn't like where I was at. But my overarching, I think, of what makes me who I am today is like is the armed forces, jiu-jitsu, and my dad. So like my dad got me into loads of hobbies to like because he was a single parent, he was working a lot. So he left the army, he became a nurse. He was a very busy guy. So he would put me in like judo, taekwondo, and kayaking. Like I did so many hobbies as a kid because it was kind of like babysitting, I guess, as opposed to being at home, and that kind of formed my free thinking in an element. Like we said about earlier, I have a stupid belief system in myself. Like I believe I can do most things I put my mind to, which it sounds incredibly arrogant, and I get that, but I think that's formed through doing lots of stuff as a
I
child.
don't think that's arrogant. Like you've said that a couple times. I think that's like I think there's a fine line between self-confidence and arrogance, and I feel like most people are led to believe that self-confidence is arrogance, like they put the line in the wrong place. But at least from the perspective of what I've learned about you so far, this to me just sounds like self-confidence. Somebody was like, "Hey, here's a thing, try it." You tried it, you did it, and you're like, "Oh, actually, I can do these things." That's self-confidence. That to me doesn't read as arrogance. It's a healthy skepticism of your own ability.
I guess so. We'd be more polite about it, but yeah, and I think the martial arts as a kid and kayaking and stuff like that, it built a somewhat robustness in me, and jiu-jitsu definitely makes people robust. Like as you know, like wrestling is way more robust than jiu-jitsu, but like getting beaten up and being the small fish for a long period of time and showing up every day and embracing the grind makes you more gritty. And I think that really helps me, especially in the army. Like if it wasn't for jiu-jitsu, I probably wouldn't have got through the army, because basic training is tough. As you know, it's not a walk in the park.
It is
I
not.
love it, and I'm glad I was a rifleman. I'm glad I was an infantry. It was amazing. I met some fantastic people. But if I didn't have that robustness through getting beat up from jiu-jitsu for like 4 or 5 years prior to that, maybe I would have given up. So I think like those are the things which have made me a better politician and a better person, in my opinion, because I I know how to operate when the chips are down. I know there's always more in the tank. I'm not as bothered by things as some of the other politicians are. Like, I would say, like, being an infantry, so like, it's a private soldier, so I was a grunt, right? Doing the terrible tasks that you have to do make you appreciate some of the great things I have now. Whereas some of my peers are so much smarter than me, and they are geniuses, and they are fantastic. But because they haven't experienced some of that suck in life, it gives them a different perspective. Like, I've got no issue getting my hands dirty. I've got no issue doing the horrible, like, I like my first election campaign. I went out and I cleaned signs, and I litter picked, and I did all of this stuff. And I was like, I like, this is areas for me. This is me doing my daily duties. Like, the army is so much tougher. So that's kind of sculpted who I am as a person. So I would say, like, the initial jobs pushed me onto where I am, and I'm so thankful for them. But it was grappling, hobbies, which gave me a creative mind. I think Jiu-Jitsu's live action problem solving, it's fantastic, and it was the army which made me tough. And I guess lucky points, like, I've had some really good political mentors. Like, I live in Rob Mancini. That's the area I represented as a councillor. That's the area I represent now. Jim Grant was one of the councillors in Rob Mancini, and he kind of took me under his wing, and he mentored me on how to be a good politician. So there's so many factors, but yeah, rambling a little bit.
What did you take from your dad? You'd mentioned a couple times that was like a big influence. Like, what was I mean, obviously a lot of things if he raised you, but like, what's the big takeaway for you that you keep leaning on that as an important influence?
My dad's like like I say, it was tough for him being a single parent. My mum passed when I was young, and
sorry, that's tough.
It's life though, and
yeah.
Like, it's one of those things that, like, it did suck, but my dad was great, and I think he's a solid, strong person, and he's always kind of had my back, and I think that's one of the things I always take away. Is like, he's never been like, you shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't go for that, despite me failing at a lot of stuff. Like when I was at school, like I said, I did terribly. It was all down to me. It wasn't down to I didn't want to learn. I didn't care about school at all. I was a wild child. But like, my dad always had my back, and he always pushed me to do things. You know, so he was like, you are going to go to Taekwondo. You are going to do this. Like, even if you're not doing well academically, like, there's other things you can do in life. So him being a strong person, like I say, he was ex-military. My dad's like 6'4". He's massive. I'm only 6'1", but 6'1" is acceptable. 6'4" is too tall. He's a freak.
I mean, I'm 6 foot, so you would both be bigger than me.
6'1" is fine.
Yeah.
6 foot is good, but like 6'4" is too much. But like, he was a brown belt in judo as well. Like, he's a solid dude who's got me into sports. So I felt like he's always had my back, and that's probably given me the confidence to go on and achieve. Because that's one of the big things. So sometimes when I speak to kids and stuff like that, because I go to schools and regularly talk about my experiences, and not necessarily get into politics, but I think a lot of people aren't kind of told that they can achieve. And I think that's why we have a lot in society where people kind of latch onto what I would deem negative influences and things, because they're not told that they can do stuff. Like, and I really believe, like, we should be encouraging our kids to explore. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I failed at so many careers, and now I'm a member of parliament. I used to run my own gym. I was a physical training instructor in the army. Like, I got accommodation from the commanding officer when I left for what I did, like in jiu-jitsu and forming clubs and stuff. And you can achieve great things, but I think having someone backing you really matters.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's good to have these kinds of things in your life, and having somebody to tell you that you can do it. That actually, I wanted to ask you, and it didn't feel like a good opportunity, and now this feels like a good opportunity. You said you had a talk with your partner about whether or not you should get into this completely life-changing thing. Do you still, like, A, continue to talk about it, and B, do you feel like that was the right decision between you? Like, is there any part of it that you regret as a result of this commitment, so to speak?
So yeah, we still talk regularly, because I think that's healthy.
Yeah.
I think we probably don't talk as much as I would like all the time, or as much as she would like, because it is separate. So when you're an MP, like, this, a lot of people don't know this, but you probably spend half your time in London and Westminster working, because you've got to be there for the votes, and half your time in the constituency. I'm down in London part of the week. I'm not like, whereas before we spent all time together. But I wouldn't change anything, to be honest, on the side. Like this is the future I want to be in. I want to get elected again. I want to do more. Like there's so much that I want to do for Swindon, and I think she kind of she gets that, and she's doing her own thing as well. So she's a financial planner. She's qualified as that now. She's advising people. Like we're both busy in different ways, but like yeah, I think it's important that we had the chat, and this is definitely busier than I expected, being honest with you. But I wouldn't change it because like it is such a gift and it's such a privilege to be where I'm at. So, and she's fantastic in supporting it. I guess she saw me before as a jiu-jitsu competitor when I was trying to be the best in the country or whatever. So there's similar levels in that sort of obsessiveness. So she's seen me where it's like, well, no, I can't do this because I'm training. I can't do this because I'm training, or I'm competing here. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. So she already knew that that's what I'm like, but you still have to have the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is when you commit to a career, and especially something that's like public service, is something people also oftentimes forget that there is a group of people supporting folks behind the scenes and allowing them to commit. And like you called it out right from the beginning, and I think that's an incredibly healthy attitude that you don't get to hear about that.
Yeah, and definitely, like there's a team behind me who are paid to work, but there's also the volunteers in the Labour Party. Like there's so many people that have had my back and have been helping me get where I'm at. And like I said, I wouldn't be able to do it without my partner. Like Alona's fantastic. She's great. Like in the beginning where I didn't have a team behind me, she was helping read the Facebook posts. She was helping with like me form emails and make sure that like so sometimes like I said, I can be a bit obsessive on things and I just want to do everything. And she's like, well, it's 10 o'clock at night. Don't put that statement out. Like that can wait till tomorrow. So it's good to have a well-grounded person around you. And I think if you look at a lot of the successful people, like they have that. They have someone who they can bounce ideas off who helps them out. And yeah, I'm lucky to have.
I think that's great. I completely agree. I have a great my wife is frankly much smarter than I am, and I get to bounce ideas off of them quite regularly. Unfortunately for me, they're also much better at jujitsu than I am, so it's nice that I have a good teacher there. But I very much enjoy having somebody who's that kind of reliable and intelligent in
Yeah.
my.
No, it's cool. And that's nothing. So my partner, she's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu as well. And that's helpful too because she understands like so it might be like a Friday and she's like I haven't trained all week, I've been really busy in London. She's like, go training. Like
Yeah,
she like whereas other people might be like, well no, we should be having dinner. Like she's like, you need to go training.
yeah,
Like I don't fancy training tonight, but you should go training. You should prioritize doing that because she gets it's good. Because jiu-jitsu is good for your mental health. Like we talked
absolutely.
about all the positives earlier, but yeah, she's been great.
Is there anything that you wish your constituents knew about combat sports? Because I feel like it's very easy for jujitsu, MMA, striking, any of these things to get a bad rap because it looks like violence. But I know you, as somebody who's been in the military, who has done jujitsu, it's not, violence doesn't have the same meaning. Like, is there anything you wish people just knew about how you view jujitsu?
I wish they would give it a go. I think that's the main one because it's not it is like it's controlled violence to a certain extent, and I fully appreciate it's not for everybody, but it will make you a better person. You'll learn more about yourself on the mats than you can get through. I think most other things. There's one of these things I can't remember who said it. It's probably someone famous, but they were like, jiu-jitsu kind of brings your personality out. Like someone's grappling style is a lot reflective of their personality, and I think that kind of makes perfect sense to be honest, because your grappling style evolves as you get older, as is your personality, you change and stuff like that. But you learn so much about yourself, and like when I left the army, I did when I opened the gym. I was working like 6-7 day weeks doing the gym, and I was a bouncer as well, just to break even. Like times were tough, right? And I would often invite the other bouncers to come and train jiu-jitsu because I know it would be good for them. Only a handful stuck at doing it because of the ego, all right? And like I would see that in people. I would see people's attitude toward things change and how they are, and I'm like, well, you probably need to work on yourself a little bit. And I think jiu-jitsu is very helpful for that. Like, realizing that it's okay to be vulnerable is a positive, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, it's realizing things aren't always going to be great and things are going to suck sometimes, but then you're going to get these wins and you're going to get better. Like, building foundations for jiu-jitsu is huge. So I would love more of my constituents to give it a go. I think it would be incredibly beneficial for the mental health and physical health.
Just out of curiosity, is there any like fun stories you have from bouncing that you feel comfortable sharing?
I don't know, really. I guess learning the trade of bouncing was quite fun in a sense. So like when and yeah, again, I think being a bouncer actually is something which helped me being a politician on the small politics of conversing with people. So like I'm realizing this now as we're talking, but like when you first start, you kind of join a firm essentially of like who's going to give you employment. So I was lucky. There was a guy called Phil Wells who was an MMA fighter, really really good guy. He used to work for a firm called Platinum, and he got me working for them. And when you start, nobody really wants you, so you kind of just get pushed around different clubs until one head doorman goes, do you know what? I want you on my regular slot. So you're kind of just bouncing around. They call it like being a jacket filler. And I went to certain clubs and I saw certain people that were quite heavy-handed, and you could easily get indoctrinated into that. Like, some people just are bouncers because they want to be dicks. Like, just putting it quite frankly.
Yeah.
There are good people, there are bad people. But like, I saw heavy-handedness. I saw people using force, which more often than not escalated the situation worse than it needed to be. All right. Yeah, again, ego. I ended up going to a club called Medina, and there was a doorman called Luke Jones, who, yeah, again, I would say, like, Luke's only a couple years older than me, but I would view him as a mentor because his approach to bouncing was just, I'd never really seen anything like that. So it was a late night venue. It opened at 12 o'clock. It shut at 7 in the morning. So you get a different type of clientele from some of the other clubs in Swindon, which open at 10, close at 3. You're dealing with a different customer. And like, I remember it was like kicking off upstairs, and Luke was like, come up with me, Will. So I came up with him, and he started talking to the guy, and then he started like pretending to dance. And I'm like, what is he doing? This is like, and then he's like, he basically got this guy who was borderline going to have a fight with another guy to start having a fake dance off with him. And then he talked him out of the club, and I was sat there watching it, and I was like, I've never seen anything like this in my life. So I started watching him more, and he'd be like, look, man, like, you come every week, like, like, don't ruin it all over tonight. It's only a girl. She's not that hot anyway. And like, he was just a fantastic communicator. So like, I learned a lot from him on that front because, yeah, it was quite eye opening. So learning how to be a good bouncer and watching another bouncer dance someone out of the club is good, on like negative sides, but yeah, again, have been helpful to me. Like, I've had a knife pulled on me, that's something so Luke ended up leaving, and there was a stabbing outside of the club where I was working Medina. There was like a gang fight, 2 gangs. It was completely stupid. I was there trying to break it up. After that, I ended up becoming the head doorman because they wanted some stability in the club. The owner, Dave Broom, really liked me. It was my military precision, I guess. Like, everything had to be on point, right? So I ended up becoming the head doorman. A couple of weeks after that, we had to introduce policy of not letting certain people in the club that we know are drug dealers. Yeah, like I say, I've had someone pull a knife on me. I had someone try and bottle me with a Jack Daniels bottle on the table. It didn't go too well for them. I kind of grabbed them and did a little bit of jiu-jitsu. But like, it was good. Like, I would never do it again. And I respect the people that do bouncing, because I know a lot of people look negative bouncers, but they are keeping people safe, and their job is to facilitate a good night, essentially. And yeah, being in those situations where you learn how to talk to people, because like, if like me, like my perfect night as a bouncer was having absolutely no trouble whatsoever. Right? When I was a head doorman, I was like, if we have no incidences, that means I've got to do no paperwork at the end of the night. I am happy. That's what I want. So I'm like trying to select my team so we can have the best possible people. But you also have to have the people that if it does go wrong, that they're gonna get there. So you've got to have tough people. But learning to converse with drunk people is and art, because drunk people aren't sensible, right? They're not seeing the most sense in life. So if you can have those sort of conversations with a drunk person and get them to come around to your way of thinking, having a chat on the door with a potential voter is all right. So that's built me up as a person as well. And like, yeah, again, like I met people who I wouldn't normally associate with as well, and I've got friends from that, and like, I still see some of the people that I used to let in the clubs. I don't think they recognize me anymore, but like I remember those people because there were the regulars that would come in every Thursday. They would come in. It was their sort of culture was going out clubbing, and it's, yeah, again, like it is quite a magical thing as well, having that thing to be passionate about. Like my chief of staff is a guy called Tom Butcher, and he says like everybody in life needs like a third place. And for us, that's probably like jiu-jitsu or politics. But for some people, it's the church. Some people, it's the pub. Some people, it's playing badminton. So having that third thing is what keeps everybody happy. And yeah.
It's funny to like hear you talk about not only not only getting people talking and being a better communicator, but you also like very clearly articulated how you think about structuring teams of finding the right people with various skill sets, which I'm sure has helped you as putting together your MP team.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting as well. So going back to when I was a doorman, I really wanted a female member of staff. All right. And the owner of the club kicked up a massive fuss. He was like, no, I'm only paying for 7 people. She's going to be useless. I'm not going to have it. I'm like, Dave, just trust me on this, please. Please just trust me, right? We got this girl called Rachel. She was amazing. The amount of drugs going in the club went down significantly because Rachel could search the girls. And it was, like, it was good. So it's like deciding how you want to run your team and what you want to do and what your aims are important. And yeah, like that would have helped with setting up the team for my office, because I kind of looked at all the people like this is something I didn't look at their education. Like I didn't look, like I've got some really, like, so Bella, who is my parliamentary researcher, she has 2 degrees. She's insanely clever, but I didn't look at that side of it. Like we spoke about it, we chatted, and we decided so I decided to have her because of the content of what she was saying and the fact I thought she was going to be a good fit. Like I said, Eve is really good. Like she's worked for a Liverpool council before. She'd worked for the Citizen Advice. So she was on it. Tom, like my chief of staff, he is so good at organizing, but it wasn't because of what his CV told me. It's because I spoke to him and we got down to it. So it's like, yeah, trying to work out what you need and build backwards. And that probably did come from bouncing, to be fair.
That's great. It's also an amazing skill. I mean, as somebody who's spent the majority of my career building teams, like that's not like a thing that's easily learned. That is like a bit of an innate skill of like understanding how people can fit. And then you learn things on top of it. But man, to like be able to pick that up in a natural way, I feel like it's super impressive.
I didn't even know I did it, to be honest with you.
Well,
So yeah.
you just did. Actually, I want to switch gears, and it sounds like the switching gears might talk a little bit about this. You also play D&D and Warhammer quite heavily,
Yeah.
which is like a tactics and strategy set of games. Like, how does that have any impact on the way you think about life?
Potentially, I guess. So Warhammer was something my dad got me into as a kid. So it's kind of like they used to do like a summer camping games workshop, and he dropped me off there, and I would just do Warhammer. I've literally just finished painting an old world Dwarven Mountain Hold army this Christmas, and I'm planning to play tonight with my friend Dean, who I met at summer camp all those years ago when I was like 13. But yeah, I think
So, what's actually, just to take a small step back, for people who don't know what Warhammer is, could you just give a quick description of that and like why you like it?
so. Warhammer is a strategy battle game with little figurines. You build up armies, you have points, and then you play each other. It's kind of like Risk, I guess. So,
Yeah.
or Total War. Total War is the one I was thinking of. But I do a lot more of the painting now than playing. I think my mind always goes back to this with structures. From painting Warhammer, painting Age figurines, it starts bad, it gets better, it gets a little bit worse. Then you've got a finished product, which is, well, I think I'm quite good at painting now, to be honest with you. But it's also the same as jiu-jitsu in the sense that you have to take yourself out of other things you're thinking about to do it. So I can spend hours painting a model, and I'm not stressing about something else in life. The same is with jiu-jitsu. You have to be in the moment with it, and I love that. Like, I find painting Warhammer really therapeutic. I find the gaming side of it, I don't really care about winning or losing that much too much with it. I just like catching up with my friends. So like we rent a table at the local club, Atomic Card, and we just go play, chat some shit, and have a good time. Instead of like I did D&D, I ran a campaign, like a one shot on. So Dungeons and Dragons, for your listeners, is a fantasy role play game. You can do it with figurines, or you can do it in the mind. If you play Baldur's Gate, it's similar to that, which is a video game. But I ran a one shot for my friends on New Year's. We just met up, we played D&D for 4 hours, and then we played some card games afterwards. It's just a good blast, you know. Like, I don't drink that much anymore because I don't have time, but I still enjoy those social interactions, and I think that's quite cool, and it's a way you can kind of still do that, which is decent.
How did you get into D&D? Like, you explained Warhammer, you said your dad got you into it. How did you get into
COVID.
Okay.
So some of my friends were playing it for a long time before. When COVID happened, obviously things were very, very crazy, and with the lockdowns we had in the UK, you couldn't really go out and see people, but we still wanted like to meet up essentially and have social interactions. So we started doing Zoom D&D sessions. So that was what kind of got me into it. It was something I always wanted to play because it's similar to Warhammer. It's a similar crowd, but I never had anybody I'd never group to play it with, or like a dungeon master or whatever. So yeah, in lockdown, I kind of jumped at that idea, and we still play, not as regularly as I'd like, but we play quite a bit together, the same group, which is cool.
How would you suggest somebody who doesn't play D&D and like maybe is on the outside or has watched like a Dimension 20 or something and wants to get into it? Like, how would you suggest somebody get into it?
I think there's a fantastic thing called Critical Role. I don't know if you heard of that. It's like a kind of podcast of people playing D&D. Watch that first. Obviously, they're like elite level players. They're like the Gordon Ryans of D&D. But watch them, and if you think you'd be interested, there's loads of chat forums online where you could find other people that do online D&D, where you can do a taster session, or even look out in your local town. Like, I'm sure if you go on your Facebook groups, there will be someone doing it. But yeah, I would say watch Critical Role to kind of get an understanding of what it is first, and then reach out online. But give it a go. It's fun. Really weird and awkward at the beginning, trying to get into playing a character, but when you become quite comfortable with your group, it's a fun thing to do, you know. And like, you can experiment with that role play side of it, which is, yeah, as long as you don't care about, yeah, again, ego. Like, nobody's going to judge you. Like, no one's going to be like, oh, that's a stupid accent or whatever. Like, just drop the guard and play. I think it's worth doing.
Are you more of the storyteller, dungeon master type, or do you prefer to play as a character and let someone else sort of control them?
I prefer to play as a character, but I do DM every now and then. Like, one of our friends, Connor, he's a normal DM, and I can, because he's really good at it. So like, when he wants to rest, I'll step in and do it every now and then. But I prefer just having that one character. It's easier to pick up, less to focus on. So yeah, I prefer doing that. And I like being part of the team. Whereas when you're the DM, you've got this fantastic job where you're controlling the narrative and you're making everyone have fun. So it is enjoyable. But yeah, I like being problem solving and learning new things as I'm going along.
I feel like that's probably got some parallels to like politics and tabletop games. Like, I'm sure there's like something in there. Is there something that you've noticed that there's like thinking about the strategies, communicating, like figuring out the tactics to get people to come along and join your team or take your idea? Like, is there anything there, or am I just like reaching?
Probably reaching, but there might be like subconscious things, you know what I mean? And yeah, again, it's all communicating, you know. And I think there are a lot of people that probably don't communicate in life as much as they should.
Yeah.
So there will be some elements of that where you're in a D&D party and you are having conversations and you have to think on your feet, which is a useful skill for politics. So yeah, probably in a small piece sort of sense.
You know, I just over the last like hour or so, we've covered so many different topics. You've had such a varied set of experiences. Like, It's actually really impressive to like sit on the other side and hear some of these stories. I feel like oftentimes in life we don't really realize how much we've done until someone points out that you've done a lot of really
Yeah.
impressive things. Is there any piece of advice that through all those varied experiences that you wish people would understand, or anything that you want people to know?
Just keep going is the main one. Like, keep going and don't be afraid to talk to people and ask for help. I think those are big things. Like, back yourself, even if things are tough. Keep going. Have conversations with your significant others. Don't be afraid of how people view you as well, because if you're worrying about other people viewing you in a negative light, you're probably not going to do a lot. Like, sometimes you're going to have to look bad to get, like, to reap the rewards. Like, we all sucked as white belts, right? We all did terrible, and you can run a gym. Like, so keep going, believe in yourself, and have conversations. If something doesn't feel right and you're not happy with something, talk to your coach. I would never tell any of my students, like, to go away. Do you know what I mean? Like, if they're like, oh, this isn't working, I'm like, well, let's have a discussion. Let's see what is wrong. Like, obviously sometimes people will come to you and it's like, no, you're just started training, things are going to suck, it's going to take time, and there's no natural fix other than taking time. But yeah, always have these conversations.
I feel like one of the most interesting things that I've noticed since I've started coaching is the number of completely unrelated to jujitsu topics people like show up with. You know, like, should I get this vaccine? Should I break up with my significant? It's like, I'm just your jujitsu coach. Like, I might have an opinion on this, but why are you asking me this?
And that's a really not a troubling thing, because obviously I try to explain this to people as well. So when you're a coach, you're not just teaching jujitsu, right? You know, you are there kind of like a counselor to a certain extent. Not the political term, as in
Right.
like you're
Therapy.
managing people's emotions, and like I can see when people aren't having a good day, like you know, like, and you can have these conversations. But there is also a weird thing with our sport. So there's this fantastic grappler called Laurie Karpinen, who's Planet Tempura. He's someone who beat the crap out of me so many times. He's fantastic. But he said about it, it's like there's a god complex with coaches, right? People look at a coach and like they'd ask questions, assuming because you are good at jujitsu, you are gonna know the answer to something else. And like, I think I'm a pretty intelligent person, and I've clearly done quite a lot. So on certain circles, if you want to talk about politics, I can probably help out. But if you want to talk about certain scientific elements or something like that, I don't have a clue. So, but there are coaches that embrace that ego of like thinking that they know more than they actually do. Like, I see some people in America, some famous jiu-jitsu guys, they comment on politics, and I'm like, you literally don't have a clue what you are talking about. And I'm not going to go on there and have an argument because there's no point. But like, it is quite scary, the confidence certain people have and the amount of faith students put in someone because they are good at something, which is a bizarre one, to be honest.
I feel like sometimes it happens because, to your point earlier about communication, not everybody is effective at communicating or asking for help. And jujitsu enables people, gives them an environment and a structure with which they can be vulnerable. And for many people, it's like some of the first times they're vulnerable and saying, wow, I just got beat up and now I have this person I can ask for help. Maybe I can ask them for help on something else because it's a low barrier to entry. And all of a sudden, this jujitsu coach is like, life advice, science, politics, nutrition. And it's like, no, 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 this person is just, they're just an expert on jujitsu, and not even all of jujitsu, because not everyone, not every black belt's an expert on all of jujitsu. That's my
Yeah.
thinking anyway.
I do think to the most part they are rare cases though. Like, I think there are lots of really decent jujitsu instructors across the world that do know a lot about other things as well. You know, but it is very it's a very weird thing, I think, being an instructor as well, because like you would know this, but like, you for a limited period of that day you are the center of people's attention,
Yeah.
which feeds into certain people's egos as well. Do you know what I mean? And that's quite a challenging thing. Yeah, I think that's something which a lot of coaches don't deal with well, because they might hype up their own importance.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, well, I've got 50 people in my class, they're all listening to me and they rely on me, and that's a big thing. Where it's like, well, what does it really mean? You know, like, take it for what it is. It's a fantastic, beautiful thing, and you are offering an amazing service. but it doesn't make you a knowledgeable person.
No, no. Hopefully you're just knowledgeable in at least the thing you're trying to show them.
Yeah, and we're getting better at calling out the people that aren't nowadays,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's why I like Belt Checker, the website for jujitsu. Like they called out a whole bunch of black belts that weren't actually black belts simply through social proof.
I don't know if I'm on that.
It's a free site. It's something that my friend Christian Graugard from BJJ Globetrotters built, and I help him run. And we've found a whole mess of fake black belts over the years, and now it's really helpful when you go to train somewhere and somebody's like, "Are you really this belt?" You're like, "Yeah, actually, here's a whole bunch of people who verified it. It's free to sign up, free to use."
I will sign up after this. I don't think I have, to be honest with you.
That's cool. And if you add yourself, I'll put your link in the show notes because I think it's a helpful thing for people to say, "Oh yeah, okay, people have validated that this person is a black belt."
Yeah, no, definitely. Because it makes sense because we've always had the issue with the IBJJF with 10th Planet. I don't know if you know, but like this is such
I
a
do
ball ache
actually, and I hate IBJJF for this kind of impact on the sport. Lots of positive, but also a lot of negative there. Like being gatekeepers of something that I don't think should be gatekept.
So for my personal experience, they really frustrated me. So I competed all the way up to purple belt IBJJF. I've done the Euros, I've done the World, British National. Like I competed a lot of IBJJF. Got my brown belt. Didn't compete in the gi till later on in the brown belt, so I didn't do the IBJJF. I didn't do the no gi. I then went over to 10th Planet, right? I signed up as 10th Planet, tried to do an IBJJF event. They said, no, you're a registered purple belt. And I said, well, I've been promoted. Here's Denny promoting me. Like he got Kaio Terra to sign it off because for an odd reason, like because the IBJJF were really anti-Eddie. Kaio was the head of 10th Planet, essentially in like giving out bouts. Kaio signed it off. The IBJJF said, well, you don't live in America. And I'm like, I get I don't live in America, but I go over there and train quite regularly, this is, he goes, no, you can't be a 10th Planet brown belt because there's no black belts in the UK. Can't do it. And I'm like, okay, well, what, do you want me to compete at purple belt? They're like, no, you can't compete at purple belt because you've competed at brown belt in Nogi at another competition. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, I can't, I want to compete in your overpriced event because it's a prestigious event. I want to do brown belt because that's the belt I am. Like, if you don't think I'm a brown belt, I'm going to get smashed and it doesn't matter, right? But you won't let me compete at purple belt and I can't get signed off. Like, I just don't know what to do. And we went back and forward for ages, and in the end, I just gave up. I was like, I'm not going to bother. So,
that's very unfortunate.
Which is sad.
Yeah, it's because it's like these things should be a simple validation mechanism. Like, yep, we think so. You're not going to get hurt. We trust that you've done the right steps, taken the right steps, and now go ahead and try to prove yourself, or don't try to prove yourself. But to gatekeep and keep people out of things where it's like, hey, they just want to do something for themselves, which is often what competition is. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and I definitely felt like it was an anti-Eddie rhetoric as opposed to anything of any sense.
I would love to pretend that it's anti-Eddie, but I think the IBJJF is anti-anything not IBJJF. So, and that's the issue for me, is if they were like, hey, this one person that we have a problem with and we can prove it, that's one thing. But that's not the case. Eddie's got, 50 to 100 schools and incredibly talented grapplers and proof in hundreds, thousands of competitions around the world that these people know what they're doing. And the IBJJF is like, no, this can't be the case. And it's just an unfortunate situation.
But naturally, people are leaning away from it now, so it's kind of like it is what it is. But it is a bit sad because it's something I wanted to do.
Yeah,
and it is a shame, but it is what it is, right?
Exactly. I'm glad that we are slowly moving away from these kinds of associations, and that it's more there's more sort of trust in people and their word and their abilities, and it's not like, oh, we have to validate you. You check the box, and now you can be a part of this.
It's such a bizarre thing as well, isn't it? When we were talking about like the validation of bouts, a bout is a very personal thing between your instructor and you, and the levels don't necessarily go across the board. I'm really strict. I'm not going to lie. Some people might call it sandbagging. My average for giving out a blue belt is 3 years, but I just think that's because the 10th Planet system takes a lot of time to develop and learn. there's less ego on that front and people chasing the belts in my club because you don't see the belts on a day-to-day basis. And I get it. Like when I was a white belt, I hated being a white belt. I really wanted my blue belt. Like even if I wasn't ready for it, I just didn't want that white strap. I wanted the blue strap. I get that, but like my club is quite strict. We've had people come from other clubs, and that's not to diminish their club, but they go off on attendance basis, and you get it after X period of time. I would never take anybody's belt away from them. I hate the thought of that. I think it's disrespectful. There's just different standards, and I've always said it. Like I've had people come to me and they're like, "Oh, well, shall I give my belt back? Shall I be a white belt? Shall I be a blue belt?" And I'm like, "No, it's just going to take you longer to get to the next step, but we will get there together. It's just going to take time, you know." And like, it's a really weird one to be so like you said, to have such a gatekeeping element where there's not really rules on what is a belt. It's arbitrary to the gym you're in, right? And yeah, it's an odd one to have so much of a controlling element over something which I've seen black belts that suck. I've seen blue belts that destroy me. Like it's a very strange thing.
That's a really interesting thing that you just said that I don't think I considered until you said it. That um, the belt has less impact when you don't see it worn all the time, and you're not putting it on yourself all the time. Like as somebody who trains, I trained no gi almost exclusively for a few years, and so I didn't really think about it. But then as soon as I started training the gi, it started like becoming more prevalent in my head. Not that I really care. I don't. I just want to get better. But I also
Yeah.
didn't really think about the impact of seeing that belt all the time, and how that has affected your students of like not seeing it all the time.
Yeah, man. Like, and yeah, again, I don't knock other clubs because everyone has their way of doing things, and it's quite it's quite common at other clubs which I've trained at in the past to stand in rank order, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but in that instance, you are also adding to the thing that because you are higher rank, you are superior in a sense, and I don't like that. Like I really don't like that. You know, I love the fact at my club it's so certain people don't like it because it's not your traditional martial arts. It's not centered around discipline as much. Like I wouldn't like I've seen bad gyms in the past where they tell people off for stepping off the mat to get water without permission and things like that. Like hydrate, talk, like don't take the piss. And like one thing does bug me, like when you're rolling, you're rolling. I don't want commentary. I don't want people messing around having conversations and stopping and like chatting. Like you're rolling. Like you do 3 to 4 rounds in a class. That is the priority. Like talk after class. We got all the time in the world after class. But like if you have a question for me, or if you want to talk when you're drilling and you want to have fun and have that awesome environment, that's great. Like, cut the discipline out. You still have to have respect there, but I don't like the hierarchy and the discipline.
I think I actually really like the fact that this is a thing that people A think about and then B choose to implement, because I I actually agree with you for the most part. I mean like 95% of what you said I agree with. I don't care for the lining up in rank order. I like the idea of lining up, but it's just here's the start of class, here's the end of class, right? Like so, but rank order, I couldn't care less about that. And if you're rolling, yeah, roll. Like it's okay to laugh and
Yeah,
enjoy
yeah,
the
of course, yeah.
roll. And somebody gets you in a good submission. You're like, oh, that was so sneaky. Like, nice job. Like that stuff is great. But when you're there, like, honor the mat in a way.
Yeah, exactly that. Again, honor the mat is and your opponent as
Yeah.
well,
And
because
people's
like
times. Yeah. That's the way I think about it.
you got one like it's one of those things like this is I don't know if other clubs do this as much, but I pick all of the roles. All right. I don't allow people to choose their own roles.
Oh,
I started
interesting.
it as this. I started it as a safety thing. All right. So it would be like when we have new people, I pair them with more experienced people, sizes, stuff like that. But what it also eliminates is people picking the roles that benefit them when they're tired. Or like I love a hard round. I always like because I don't train as much now. When I'm in the gym, I have the hardest rounds. I pick the other black belts, the brown belts, the purple belts. Like, I go for the killers because I want to make the most of it. But in other gyms where you pick your own roles, I see when people get tired, they choose people they know they can relax with. And when they don't have that, some people choose to try and talk their way through a role as opposed to rolling. And I'm like, well, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're not taking the beating you need to take, you know, and you're doing them a disservice because they're not going to get to practice jiu-jitsu for the 7 minutes. So yeah, that's probably why it's a pet hate for me a little bit.
That's interesting for a lot of reasons. But one of the things I'm just curious about is like my gym, we've got about between 400 and 500 jujitsu students. And I want to know who they all are, but that's too many people. And so, sometimes I'll have a morning, I teach the morning classes, for the people who go to work shortly after. Like I do that a couple days a week. Sometimes I'll have a class with 50 people. I'll have like a few people that I don't know ever, but they're, purple or brown. So I couldn't choose those things effectively.
Yeah.
Like there's an implicit thing for you of you have to know everyone and their levels to do that effectively.
Yes, but my gym is a lot smaller than that.
Okay.
So I think in its peak, we had 52 students. Like the max I would have on the mat at a time was like 24, something of that nature. But I absolutely, well, not now because I'm not teaching full time anymore, but when I was teaching full time, I knew everybody. Like I know everybody. And like one of the things which I think bugs my students, but I used to do it quite a lot. Like I constantly engage with my students outside of the gym as well. Like I'm like, when are you in class next? When are we doing this? Blah, blah, blah. How's your foot? If you like, I know if a student was injured. Do you know what I mean? I know if a student's not showing up. I'm like, why haven't you been in class? Because like with 50 people and it being my full-time job, I can manage that. 500 is probably impossible to do that, to be honest with you. I don't think you'd be able to.
I'm not even the head coach. I'm just like an assistant coach that I teach, a couple mornings a week. My wife teaches one of the evenings. I think we've got 8 coaches or 9 coaches, not including the kids coaches. So I think it's interesting, but I tried to just imagine logistically how I would pair people up, and I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I don't think you could do it. So the gym's been open, it'd be 7 years in February. For the first 6 years, I taught every single class, other than when I went on holiday, and that was 15 classes a week. Like I would teach and I rolled. So our morning classes we didn't roll. Morning classes were just specific repping because I love drilling. Like I know this eco training is coming out and everyone loves it. I'm a firm believer in drilling. Like I think I'm not dismissing eco training. I think I missed the boat because I was focused on politics, so I didn't really invest my time learning about it. But I love drilling. That's like when I went to train with the Mendes brothers, they are stone cold killers and they just drill, right? So the morning class would be doing 50 reps of rubber guard or footlocks, and we did that. Like it was just switch alternating days because that's what I wanted. I wanted my students to get good at, and I wanted to practice as well. So it's kind of like the morning classes for me and the people that wanted to sacrifice to be there, but they were tough drilling classes. The other classes, lunch and evening, I would roll every class. Like I love it, man. Like it's great. But when you're doing nothing else, it's fairly easy. Like it was tougher at the start. For the first 18 months when I was doing like 2 jobs, when I was bouncing and being a coach, it was tougher. But after that, it's fairly easy. Like you get a bit tired, but then you just alter how you roll. And like that's another thing of like if you're a full-time athlete, you need to learn how to roll chill. You need your jiu-jitsu to be able to function when you're tired because you're going to be tired at some point.
Yeah, that's true. I think I just want to say this about the eco training. I don't think it's a bad thing. What I do think it does is it gives people who are not experienced enough to do it an accidental out of like the example I use constantly is one of the instructors that I teach with was watching people roll, letting them do the eco part of the training, and they choked someone out from the guard. Like a white belt was in another white belt's guard and then guillotined them while in the guard. Yeah. And they were like, good, you learned. And I was like, that's not ecological training. Like that's a false positive. And you as the instructor need to flag that that's a false positive. And they're like, but it worked. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not going to work. You get a blue belt and that's not going to work. Like that's exactly. Not like that's my issue with a lot of the ecological training is it allows for bad habits when there's not enough eyes on it or the eyes don't realize that something is a false positive in more advanced things.
Yeah. That's right. For me, like, I don't ever want to stop someone doing what they want to do in jiu-jitsu as long as it's safe, right? Because we always get this, high percentage, low percentage moves. But if someone asks my advice on something, I'm like, well, maybe you shouldn't spend the majority of your time spanning Americanas and Kimuras because you don't see them hit in high-level competition, like that sort of thing. Whereas in eco training, you don't have that buffer, do you? Because like you say, if you can get it to work on a white belt, like you've just said there, choking someone in their guard, that's not going to work when you're a purple belt. So for me, it's a waste of time learning it. But the natural environment, you will be able to get it to work on lesser people. So I guess it's the problem. The guy who runs the gym now, James, he's gone through the phase. So obviously with me, all the way up to brown belt, drilling. That's what, like drilling and rolling. He kind of fell into the eco habit. He's gone back now and he's kind of doing a hybrid, more focused drilling, but with a smidgen of eco. So he does eco once a week now. And I think that's good because I do think there is benefits to eco. Like you force me to go into environments I don't want to go into as a black belt, which is cool. You can do that. That's nice. But for beginners, you need to have a foundation, in my opinion, before you can get onto that. So I don't think you should be doing eco until you're like a purple belt and you understand the game a little. In my opinion.
Well said. I could not have articulated that better. I actually completely agree. You need the foundation to know what's like false positives and dumb stuff.
Yeah, because there's so many errors in jiu-jitsu that unless you're told why, you just wouldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's our job as coaches, I guess.
Exactly. What are you excited for in the future? Like, what are you looking forward to these days now that you're sort of splitting your time between, Parliament and jiu-jitsu and family?
So for Parliament-wise, changing the law and improving the country is the big one. There's a lot of projects which I'm working on that, like I say, with the police one, armed forces apprenticeships. We got some massive employment land in the town. If I can get that sorted out, like these are things I'm really passionate about. Like making Swindon a better place is what I want to do on that front. For jiu-jitsu, I just want to carry on training and seeing the people that I used to be able to smash beat me up. Like that's what I want. I want to be like, I go into the gym now and I'm getting tougher rolls than I ever had before because I'm not training that much. I just want to carry on the journey and see those people. I would love. No, I will. I will compete this year. It'll probably be in a regional thing. Like I love being on Polaris. It was great, but it was definitely, I bit off more than I could chew. They didn't give me a choice in that, to be honest, because they offered up the opponent. I took it. Matt is an absolute beast.
I thought it was a great match. I thought you did incredibly well. It was a super exciting thing to watch from my perspective.
Yeah, but there was no way I was going to win that match. To be honest with you, like I just wasn't sharp, and I felt the difference in it because obviously what you can see and what you feel are different.
Of course.
And like I used to be pretty good at leg locks, right? My leg locks and my pummeling was pretty good. Like majority of my wins have come from straight ankle locks. I'm pretty good. When he sat back on my foot, if that was a couple of years ago, I feel like I would have had a fair shot at countering it. I'm not saying I'd submit him or anything like that because he's good. But in the moment, because I was so out of training, my mind just wasn't sharp. Like I couldn't really envision any pass. And that was obviously a problem. Like I managed to get into rubber guard, I managed to start doing certain things, but because I wasn't sharp, there was nowhere for me to go. So like I'm actually quite pleased with my performance because I didn't feel like I embarrassed myself. I feel like I went out there, I went up against a really gritty, good, skilled dude. I escaped a couple of his footlocks. I held him in the guard. We did some stuff and it was fun. And I really like him as well. He's a really nice guy. So that was cool. But I wasn't on that competitive level to see the opportunities I needed to deliver. So I didn't feel like outside of potentially holding him in rubber guard and like stalling the match out for 10 minutes, which would have been challenging in itself, I didn't feel like there was a win factor for me in the moment. Like I was quite blasé about the match in a sense because like there was no expectation of me because like we already raised quite a bit of money for charity, raised a couple of grand, which was great. Highlighted this sport, like, and this year again, like I'm not gonna say arrogance, I'm gonna say confidence, but in terms of getting viewers on the sport in the UK, nothing has happened like that before. I was on every national media outlet. We've got some fantastic grapplers who can go to ADCC, perform exceptionally well, and they don't even make it on regional news. And like the fact that they had a member of parliament doing it, and there were stories in every media outlet, there was interviewers, it was huge. Like ITV, BBC, Times Radio.
That's
like
how I found you, by
everybody
the way, was BBC. I found I was in the UK for work, and BBC got recommended to me, and I was like, oh, cool, I could probably interview this guy.
Yeah, and like that in my head, like that is so good for the sport, because we can talk to ourselves, and that's great, and you can recommend it to friends, but somebody would have started at a gym after seeing that, right? Like, I shouldn't read the comments, but like sometimes I read the comments on videos, and in certain ones there were some good comments. There were people saying, oh, this guy's cool, it's great to see jiu-jitsu, it's great to see politicians doing something different, and then other people might have started doing jiu-jitsu because of that, and that elevates our sport, and I love that, and I think that was great. So the pressure was kind of off. Like I said to people before, I was like, I think I've got a 20% chance of winning. All right. All of my students, to be fair, my students, like, so this is how I'm probably a little bit stupid. So I don't follow the competition scene as much as I should anymore. But when Polaris offered me Matt, I told James, who's the instructor at the gym, and he was like, you do not want Matt. Matt is tough. He's going to beat you up. He's really good. And I'm like, well, I'm not backing out. I'm taking Matt, and I'm like, I'm going to beat Matt. And they're like, no, you're not. You're not going to beat Matt. That's not possible. So I kind of, the realization of what was going to happen was, I want to go out there and have a good match. And we got to do that. So it was cool.
That sounds like a successful thing to me. I mean, like you said, if anybody starts jiu-jitsu as a result of that, if it helps you get jiu-jitsu into the police training as a result of it being more mainstream, even just a little bit, I think that's a huge.
And like, from a selfish term, it elevated me in politics in the Westminster bubble, because I had people coming up to me and they were like, oh, you know, like, you Will Stone, and I got interviews for House magazine, and then like other MPs started knowing who I was, and like when you just mentioned policing, this is something that did happen. So so weirdly, when you vote in Westminster, right, it's so stupid. So they're like, you're in the chamber or you're around the chamber, you've like, and a division gets called, which means a vote's going to happen. You've got 8 minutes to get to the chamber. You have to go down a corridor and you have to tap your pass on a screen, and that records your vote, right? So you've got all of the MPs channeling down a corridor, right? And it's very stupid, because you would think you could just do it on your phone, or there'd be some digital way of doing it. You have to do it this way. But the good thing about that, and it's an opportunity to speak to ministers who you wouldn't ordinarily get an opportunity. And it's very slow because you're shuffling down this corridor. I really wanted to speak to Diana Johnson, the policing minister. And I'd sent her an email and I hadn't got a reply. But she was in the queue next to me. And I'm like, hey, Diana, I started talking about it. She goes, oh, yeah, you were on the news for your jiu-jitsu thing. Blah, blah, like, and that made it easier for me to have the conversation. So, like, yeah, it was good for me. It helped get better connections with the press as well, which is really important. And the press were good. There was some shitty press, to be fair, but majority of it, like, the press were good. And they got to see me in my natural environment, which was quite interesting for them, because you don't normally experience politicians in a relaxed environment. They were all really keen to interview me afterwards, because they were like, oh, I don't know if they thought I was going to be really tired and say something stupid, but it was just interesting for them, because it was a new story, and they got to know me, and I think I get on with quite a lot of them in like a kind of friendly but not friends, if that makes sense, because people always get really upset with the press in politics, because they expect, because people are nice to them, that they're always going to be nice to them, but it is the press's job to hold us to account.
Exactly.
Right? And that's the reality. Like, there are some poor press. Of course there are. There are some outlets which I think are really shady, and I don't like how they operate. But to the most part, like, the press are there as a shield for the public to basically tell politicians they're being dicks.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important we have that. So building the connections with the press and being able to have these conversations was so good for me, because as a backbench MP, there's so many new MPs. You wouldn't have those necessarily, you know. So it was cool, you know. I did a really cool podcast with Politics Joe, where they came down to the gym and we talked. I don't know if you watched it, but we talked about toxic masculinity in the jiu-jitsu community and stuff. Because like, they first wanted to come down and do the story about being it was first like, oh, toughest MP in Parliament, and then Ed Campbell, the reporter, was like, could we do something slightly different? Could we talk about positive male role models, experience in jiu-jitsu? I was like, yes, I would love that.
Love that.
So
I didn't see the whole thing. I watched a couple of minutes of it though, and I'm super glad that you talked about toxic masculinity as as a thing that needs to be addressed, not as a thing that needs to be, held up to like, this is what people should be like. It's horrible.
Yeah, I and I think currently we've been going the wrong way around it. To be honest with you, I think governments across the world have been going the wrong way about toxic masculinity. Like, we need positive masculinity. Like, we need, like, my dad taught me to be a gentleman. You know, that's something. It's like, we need to show young men that it is okay to be a gentleman. Just be a good person. You know, it's okay to go and do controlled violence in jiu-jitsu, boxing, judo, all this stuff. It's fantastic. It's a beautiful thing, you know. But don't just act like an asshole with it. You know, be respectful. Like, be a nice person. Like, and I think that's something we've lost. And I think a lot of political influencers, a lot of politicians have got scared of influencers because they see them gaining power and they think shutting them off is the answer, where in my opinion it's not. It's about putting up an alternative. You know, like, and I want to fill this space. I know I'm not like the toughest dude on the planet or whatever, but I want to fill a space of saying to young men that, you know, you can be intelligent, you can be articulate, you can go out and you can be a black belt in jiu-jitsu, you can compete across the world, like, you can be a bouncer, like, be nice to women, like, you know, like, there's so many layers to what you can do, and we need more positive outlets for young boys, because, like, I'm not going to go on that whole it's tough to be a guy thing, because it's still better to be a guy than, how do I phrase this without getting cancelled?
I
Is
agree
still,
with where you're going with this.
you have more perks being a guy, right? Like, one of our pledges, which I'm really proud of, what the Labour Party can do, we want to reduce violence against women and girls by 50%. That's one of our aims. We're going out there. The fact that we have to say that means that by default life is probably easier as a guy. Like, you like the stalking things that happen to girls, the amount that they're like, you're more statistically likely to die if you move in with your significant other, and it's there's so many elements which are completely broken, right? So I'm not saying that guys have it tougher, because this is what the other side often get construed when I talk about, you know, young men need support. That's not me saying that young women don't need support as well, or that's not me saying that young men have it tougher than young women, but there's different levels and you have to be able to do things differently. And I think if you create this black hole where you say, well, we shouldn't support young men because they are statistically less likely to get abused than women, then that leaves men in this hole where they're searching for something else. And I think that's a really, really tricky place to be. So I think in an ideal world, we support everybody. But I think when we're approaching young men, we have to treat them differently to how we are treating young women. And I think that is through positive male role models. And I think that's one of the things. And like the validation that it is okay to be masculine. It's okay to feel these ways. It's how you channel your energy and what you want to do with your energy is the important one. It's like, harness the power as opposed to telling people it's bad.
I think that was incredibly elegantly stated. I think that you said a lot of really important things. And I think one of the things that's also really good about the way you describe this is that we have to change the definition of what tough is. Because tough doesn't mean you shut your mouth and you put your head down and you go through it. Tough means there are uncomfortable situations. You communicate about them. You be vulnerable about that situation. You address it head on in a respectful manner using your words. And you can still be a quote unquote tough individual when you communicate like openly and honestly. And it doesn't make you less of a man to say, hey, this hurt, this wasn't respectful, and I would appreciate being treated differently and putting up boundaries. And I think jiu-jitsu does an incredible job of that by saying, okay, we're both agreeing to rules, slap, fist bump, and get going. And we agree to that. And that's a setting boundaries, that's explaining consent. And that's not a thing that gets taught to the average person. And you can still be tough with it.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. It is what is tough. And I think, like, yeah, jiu-jitsu is another one. Martial arts in general as well. But like, I keep going on to different role models, so I think it's important to talk about people who have had positive impacts. Like when we're talking about tough, one of the toughest people I know is a guy called Roger Salisbury. All right, when I was in the army, he was a corporal. He's a physical training instructor, South African guy, 100 kg, and he got bronze medal in the European judo. What's it called? Commonwealth Games for judo, bronze medal, 100 kg. He could throw you on the ground at like 30 miles an hour, and if you got 100 kg of stacked African dude landing on you, you're gonna be hurt, right? He was a mentor for me. He's part of the reason I became a PTI. I never saw this man raise his voice once. I knew lots of bad leaders in the army and lots of bad people who would shout and scream and try and intimidate people. Rog carried himself with dignity, right? He was one of the people that was reading the paper, and I could see, like, this guy's a smart guy. He would carry himself well. People knew he was tough because he just admitted that. He didn't have to act up and be that sort of way. He is a gentleman. Like, we completely disagree politically wise. Like, he is a massive fan of Margaret Thatcher. I am not, but we still keep in touch now. And we have these discussions because it's important. This is another thing as well. It's important to have discussions with people you don't agree with and not hate them because of it. Right? Unless you're a racist or you're like a complete scumbag on certain elements. Like, if you are beating women, I don't think we're going to have a conversation which is going to be a positive. But if you disagree on how I run the country, and I disagree how you would like to run the country, I think we can have intelligent conversations, you know. And I think that's something which is missing in politics, especially on your side of the world as well. To be honest with you, just because you disagree with someone means they're a bad person, which is not always the case. Because how someone's raised is how they're probably going to act in life. So, like, a lot of people, when we talk politics and we talk parties, you represent an area, right? So I represent Swindon. I am from Swindon. This is my area. This is my neighborhood. I know Swindon. I love Swindon. I am probably one of your typical Swindon people. I didn't grow up in Cambridgeshire or Oxfordshire or some of these rich sort of areas. Therefore, I don't understand the culture of those areas. I wouldn't be able to represent them to the fullest, right? I just wouldn't, because I don't get it. Whereas some of these MPs, like there are MPs in the Conservative Party who I'm friends with. I'll tell you about. I'll go on to another. I'll go on to another one in a second. There's a guy called Luke who was an MP from the Conservatives. He's pretty posh, right? But I want to do something about steroids. This is another thing I've been looking at, right? I don't want to ban steroids. The jiu-jitsu community might be a little bit up in arms. I think we just need better regulations and probably better access to steroids, but in a controlled way. What I want to stop is backyard black steroids where people are making them in their garages. You don't know what you're putting in. I think if you're regulating a market and you're having medical professionals, that in my head is safer than just buying stuff on the internet and not knowing. Like, I've got nothing against controlled, regulated steroids, right? I think at a certain period in your life, you might require TRT. I think that is a reasonable thing, and I would never try and tell people they can't have that. What I don't want is young boys buying steroids offline, probably getting the cheapest ones because that's the money they can get, not knowing what they're injecting themselves with, and not knowing what damage it's going to do for them in the future. Get your blood test done, get things done properly, got no issue with that. I found out when I started, so I did an EDM writing about it, saying how, like, I want the government to acknowledge that this is a problem, because steroid use is going up massively. I then did a bit more research, and Luke from the Conservatives, he was previously a health minister. He had been doing some work on steroids. So I could have been like, well, do you know what? Like, screw this guy. He's on the other party. I don't like him. He's really posh. You know, not going to do it. I'm going to do it myself. But then I went, that is stupid. I was like, he's already done some of the hard work. So I just emailed him. I was like, hey, Luke, would you mind if we could have a chat sometime? I see you've been doing some work in this space. It'd be great if we could collaborate together. I went and had a meeting with him. He was super cool. We're now working together on this. He's helping me with the information he's already put forward. Like, that was a beautiful thing. So you can have different political ideologies, but still want to achieve the same outcome, which is important. I don't know how I got to that point. I'm sorry. But yeah.
I mean, honestly, all of this stuff is really good things to know. Like, it's good to know that there are people who are willing to, quote unquote, cross the aisle. Look, I left the United States about 6 years ago. I live in Germany now. But the politics of the United States are horrible to watch from when I was there and from afar. So anytime I hear about people making a positive impact with communication and the way that they operate politically, whether it's crossing the aisle, working with people you don't agree with, just listening, I think that's a great thing to hear. And it's a good example to set for those folks who want to know that there are people who operate like this and maybe even, take that step in that direction themselves.
Yeah, I hope more people get involved in politics, to be honest. I always say it's the way to make change happen. So, and the more normal people involved, the better things are going to get.
Do you have any advice for somebody who would want to get into politics and is maybe concerned or doesn't know how to take that first step?
Yeah. First off, find out where you politically align, because that's very important, right? Like, and I'm not saying you should join the Labour Party or Democratic Socialists or whatever. Like, you've got to find out what your values are, right? And there's various. I would take them with a pinch of salt. I would do a couple of them. There's various like quick questionnaires you can do online. Some of them are focused more to trying to get you to think a certain way. My advice would be like check some of those out. Read some books from previous political leaders. Get a scope of where you are. Then join up with your local party. Like for me, my ideal politician is someone who's gone up through the ranks of their local party. Like, so you've joined the CLP, you've taken a role as an officer, then you've become a local councillor, then you work your way up and become an MP. Different people have different perspectives. Some people they work for an MP. After they work for an MP for a couple of years, whether they want to become an MP themselves or they have a certain skill set and they get brought in. And I'm not against those people, but like my focus is Swindon, therefore it makes sense to me having people who have come through the system and understand the system. So yeah, like find out where you want to be politically, and don't be afraid to speak to different parties at the start as well. Like, because similar to Jiu-Jitsu, right? Like one club might not be what you thought it was going to be. So just because you join the Labour Party, you know, doesn't mean you will have to stay there or whatever. Like, because politics is quite personal, and you like more often than not, like say, like for me, I found people who think the same way as me, and that was very helpful. But yeah, you might not find that the first time round. And like another odd thing as well is like, depending where you live in the country, certain parties might be stronger than other parties, so it is challenging. But yeah, find out where you align politically, join up with that party, and just get involved. You know, and don't, similar to Jiu-Jitsu, don't be scared about things being tough at the start, because you know there's a lot of putting time in, which seems like thankless tasks, but it will amount to something in the future. Because political parties are like the members of the backbone. They're the ones that really do the hard graft and do the door knocking. Like, I couldn't win an election without the members and people from across the country that come out and supported me. You know, so, and a lot of that might seem thankless sometimes, but if you do want to get involved in politics, you have to do those milestones first.
Just be a people person and communicate and go and talk to people who are going to be your constituents, your colleagues, your coworkers. Is that basically what you're getting at?
Yeah, and I guess find out what you want to do as well, because like that was a really good point what you just made, and that was perfect for me because I am a people person. I love conversing and I love problem solving. Other people, like people that work for me, do equally as an important role, but they don't want to do the outward facing role. So you might be someone who wants to shape policy. You might want to work for an MP and be a senior researcher who helps him decide what he's going to do. You might want to work in the Labour Party, helping put forward their policy or helping win elections. Like, some people get a kick out of how do you campaign? What is the best way to campaign? You know, like I've got so many books on like campaigning. Like I was looking at like, well, what did Obama do? How did Obama resonate with all of these people? And then there's well, a big part of that was sending letters and doing this and that. And I'm like, well, how can we do that? And there's certain people that love it. Like, campaigning is their life. How do you get that election win? How do you manage to speak to the right voters? Because campaigning is a science in itself. You know, it's like you don't have infinite time. You can't get to every single doorstep, because we did a lot of door knocking. Don't get me wrong, I spoke to thousands and thousands of people. But when it comes to closer to the line, you have to pick the people that you're going to have the conversations with. And you're going to have to pick the people that you're going to spend your money sending letters to, sending leaflets to, and stuff like that. So some people, their love of politics is campaigning. Other people, their love of politics is policy. Some people just want to get in and be a councillor and focus on a certain issue. Like, there's people on the council which do amazing work, but they wouldn't want to be an MP. Like, they like to focus on their things, and that is what they do. So politics is for everybody. Anybody can find a home there. You know, it's just what you want to do. Like, not everybody's going to be a member of parliament. Not everybody's going to like doing political research. Like, some people just love reading and working out policy. It's all for what you enjoy.
I love that, I love having everyone find their passion and then letting them double down on what they're good at and still contribute. And that sounds like a good way of like how you put teams together. You're like, let me find the people who like campaigning, who like policy, who like research. Let me bring them all together where their views align and their passions align with mine. And let's create a team out of that.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say to everyone, do try and get involved in politics, even if that's just having more informed discussions with your friends and family. Like, you don't necessarily have to join a party, but the more you know and the more research you do, the more informed you're going to be in life. And I think that's important because, yeah, again, big topics, disinformation.
Yeah.
It's huge in the world at the minute, right? It's absolutely mad. But
so,
yeah.
Well, this was a super fun conversation. I really enjoyed like getting to know you, getting to hear your views. Is there anything that you want to promote? Anything you want people to know about?
Not really. Like, obviously, this is going out to jiu-jitsu people. If you're ever in Swindon, pop by 10th Planet. James would love to have you. I'd love to roll with you guys. I will try and get to a Globe camp at some point in the future. It's challenging with time off,
Yeah.
but yeah, just keep on trucking and yeah, like carry on spreading the love. Try and get more people involved.
Cool. Thanks so much for your time, Will.
Sweet, Eric. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you have any questions about politics in the UK, please feel free to reach out to Will. If you find yourself near Swindon and want a place to train, drop into 10th Planet Swindon. You can find their contact information and websites in the show notes. And as always, thank you for your time and attention.